confirming our count now, and I think we have a quorum. We're just confirming.
All right.
Confirming.
Good morning, Madam Chair. This is Natalia. Claudia is having some technical difficulties. We can go ahead and get started.
Okay, great. Well, welcome everyone to our first commission meeting for the year 2021. I hope everyone had a great holiday. It was safe and healthy. It's so wonderful to see all of your wonderful smiling faces. So we're going to proceed with roll call.
Thank you. We'll proceed with roll call. Member Angel Ortiz. Member Angela Elliott Santos.
Present.
Member Gore.
Present.
Member Evans.
Happy New Year. Present.
Member Perez.
Present.
Member Nash.
Present.
Member De Los Rios. Member De Los Rios.
Excuse me, yes, good morning. Present.
Thank you. Member Curry.
Present.
Member Sanders.
Present.
Member Alfonso. Okay, member Murray Ramirez. Member Anaya.
Here.
Member Choi. Member Stefan. Member Hussein.
Present.
Present.
Member Gilly. Member Arton.
Present.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Present.
That concludes.
Okay.
Present.
We do have public comment this morning. We have Alexis. Phone number ending 8717. Phone number ending 8717. If they are available, we will unmute you to speak. It does not appear that they're on the line. The next public comment would be from James Morris. Hearing none, we will move to Francine Maxwell, who I did see on the line, but it looks like she dropped. She was there. One second. Oh, there we go. Francine Maxwell, can you?
Good morning. Sorry. Happy New Year. Having technical difficulty. Francine Maxwell, NAACP San Diego branch president. I would like to request And please feel free to point me in the right direction, Madam Chair. I would like to see if you guys could request a work diversity study for the County of San Diego, specifically for the Suicide Prevention Council with a Black focus. I attended a meeting and looking at subcontractors and just looking over the staff, and I didn't see anybody Black that is on the subcontracting or anything like that. So I think that it's time that we call for a work study, diversity work. We are asking for the port, and gracious enough, there's a port commissioner that is working on that to help show us the workforce diversity report. And so I wanted to come to this commission and ask if you could do the same, not only for the entire county HR department, but specifically for that program that has a focus on suicide prevention for Black people. Thank you.
Thank you, Francine Maxwell, Chair of the NAACP. Now we have allotted 15 minutes for the commission's comments. Are there any other public comments before we proceed?
Madam Chair, we did have an e-comment submitted by former member Enrique Morones that was distributed to the board this morning after it was received.
Okay.
And that will also be posted publicly. And that referenced other matters. I believe everyone's had an opportunity to receive it.
Okay.
The next item on the agenda would be discussion of community-raised matters relating to the Commission promoting positive human relations. It is a discussion that's limited to 15 minutes, which could include the Commission placing a matter on future agenda for possible action. But if you'd like to undertake any discussion from the public comment, now's the opportunity.
Claudia, is it appropriate to read the e-comment?
Madam Chair, I can do at your request.
Please.
The comment from Enrico Morones reads, thanks for opportunity to serve. Commission's work more important than ever, as others strongly suggest interim vice chair be elected new chair and have another young member, parenthesis, Native American, Latina, be vice chair. Lots of trouble on the horizon, especially from white supremacists. Don't have their allies on commission. Strongly suggest presentation by Southern Poverty Law Center. San Diego desperately needs law enforcement reform. What happened yesterday in DC, not surprising at all. Unless you have not been paying attention, just imagine if attackers on Capitol would have been Black or brown, they would have been slaughtered. We will continue with our vigils and BLM rallies. As one king said, quote, why can't we all just get along, end quote. And as another said, quote, love, end quote. Enrique Morones, Gente Unida. That concludes that comment.
Thank you. Thank you. Can we take up the public comment from Ms. Maxwell first? Any comments on that particular request? Is it appropriate and reasonable to request that workforce diversity study?
Member Anaya has his hand raised.
I was just pointing out the fact that I don't have the little button to raise my hand. I don't have any specific comments on the end of Ms. Maxwell's request right now. I think it ties into some of our conversations on other studies that we should fold in, because this has been a topic about, you know, knowing what we're dealing with. Like, we can't make decisions unless we have the numbers and the facts.
That's
so I think what Ms. Maxwell bring to the table is something we should keep fresh in our mind as we're talking about, you know, even the boards and commissions we're made up of, and so as we have those conversations. So I'm in support of that. When the time is right, Chairperson Nash, if you could, one issue that's been brought to my attention by community members that I just want to share, but I'll defer until we cover these other two.
Okay.
Madam Chair, we have Member Perez and Member Stefan with their hands raised.
Yes, hi, I just want to comment that I also am in support of those studies. if, obviously we don't have the data. I don't know if the commission itself, prepares that or assigns somebody to it, or if we just pass it on to somebody from the county. I don't know how that works, but yeah, that's definitely, I think a lot of other people are asking for, is these numbers to see where we're at. And I fully support us being able to provide this information or referring them to the right person that can assist with that request. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Member Stefan, and then Member Gillies. Member
Your
Stefan,
audio.
it looks like you're muted. We cannot hear you.
Sorry about that. It's the story of Zoom. I think that President Maxwell's request is right in line with the mission of this commission. And I don't know what the right procedure is, but I think if it can be placed on the next agenda for further discussion. But in the meantime, if appropriate, I know that, for example, the DA's office keeps diversity numbers. So it might be a good starting point if our amazing county team that's supporting this commission, if there are already available numbers for everything, including the suicide prevention hotline, if those numbers already exist, then that might be a great starting point for a discussion.
Okay.
Member Gillies was next with her hand raised.
Hi, I'm not sure if I'm in the right order, but I wanted to address Enrique's comment. Is that okay, Chair?
We were going to take the.
I apologize. I'll step back. Thanks.
Right. Okay. All right. Any other comments on President Maxwell's public comment?
Member Evans has her hand raised.
Good morning again. Yes, I'm very much in support of President Francine Maxwell request. I think it's really timely at this point.
Great. Any other comments?
I don't see any other hands raised, Madam
Okay.
Chair.
All right, I am definitely in full support. Data drives everything. You don't know where you're going without data. And in regards to workforce data, we've again, someone, I think Commissioner Anaya mentioned, yes, we have continued a discussion about the presentation on diversity. Francine, President Maxwell's request is definitely in line with our thinking. The staff could, gather the data. We'll put it on our next agenda to discuss it more. But if we could go ahead and proceed with, asking the staff to pursue that particular request and bring us back a recommendation on how to access the data, the workforce data information. From boards and commissions to the various departments within the county, including the suicidal piece. Thank you, District Attorney Summer, for saying that and some of that data is already available and kept. And so when the staff can get back to us in terms of how to proceed, that would be much appreciated.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We will put that on the next agenda item. So for that discussion and potential actions.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's proceed with our Mr. Monrona's email. I wanted to really speak to a piece that he brought up in terms of the current state of our country and the violence that's occurring. I just wanted to kind of share my comments as chair that Martin Luther King in 1957 penned a piece about at the center of nonviolence stands the principle of love. In struggling for human dignity, the oppressed people of the world must not allow themselves to become bitter or indulge in hate campaigns. To reiterate or retaliate with hate and bitterness would do nothing but intensify the hate in the world. Along the way of life, someone must have sense enough and morality enough to cut off the chain of hate This can be done only by projecting the ethics of love to the center of our lives. The violence we witnessed on Capitol Hill yesterday, at this moment, in fact, is the manifestation and culmination of reckless leadership, a pervasive misuse of power, and anarchy. This is not protesting or activism. This is insurrection and assault on our democracy, an attempt coup incited by words and actions of current leadership in this country. In the latest show of failed leadership, we witnessed the Capitol under siege by bad actors who had no other objective than to disrupt the constitutional proceedings of a fair and rightful transition of power. Who would have known when the San Diego County Board of Supervisors reinstituted the Leon Williams San Diego County Human Relations Commission that our work of promoting positive human relations is now at the center of attention in America's finest city and the world. Commissioners, let's get to work. Our families, residents, and future generations are depending on us. Thank you very much. Any other commissioners have any comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We do have Member Corey with his hand raised.
Well, what I really wanted everybody is to stop and ponder what happened when the Black Lives Matter protest took place in Washington, D.C., and the amount of police that existed to support and protect the Congress buildings at the time, and what happened yesterday, the lack of police support, lack of protection. You should hear what everybody over the world is talking about America and American democracy. I will stop at that. Thank you.
Member Gillies has her hand raised.
Thank you. I would like to echo also what Member Corey was just saying, and that I spoke to my staff at ADL yesterday and actually said, you know, when we go into schools and we educate and people say they don't understand what white privilege looks like, that they can now just look at what happened in our country yesterday in the Capitol and say, there it is on display for everyone to see. So that wasn't what I was going to say, but thanks for the opportunity. I wanted to also respond to Enrique's comment around SPLC doing a presentation. And I would share with you that ADL has been monitoring white supremacists for decades. And I would be happy to have myself or a member of my team, if at some point, Chair, you would like to have a short presentation on who these people are, their ideology, because it is not going away on January 20th. It is going to increase. The people that perpetrate this type of ideology are getting more and more angry. It doesn't just go away when we have a new administration. So I think understanding where they're coming from and who they are, including our friends from Defend East County that were also at the Capitol yesterday, I think it's important for us to know who and what. So I'm just putting that out there as an offer. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Gillies.
Madam Chair, I don't see any other hands raised.
I see Estella.
Yes, Member De Los Rios. Thank you.
Yes, good morning. I want to echo everything that all my colleagues have said here and also support Enrique's statements. And I think it's an excellent idea, doubling back on what my colleague Tammy mentioned. I think it'd be a great idea to have a presentation for ADL because she's correct. More now than ever is when there's going to be more coming out of the woodwork, as we say. And I think it's best that we be prepared because we tend to react after the fact. So I think it's better that we are prepared and do some education and awareness. So thank you very much, commissioners.
Madam Chair, Member Anaya.
I'm not as eloquent as some of my fellow commissioners on topics like this. I get a little more emotional, and I like to be direct. The one thing that keeps going through my head is, as I watched the things happen in DC yesterday, I kept thinking, well, what does it look like at home, and what could it look like at home? And George's Commissioner, his comments are very well taken. If similar situations were going on here, how would they be treated? And based on recent conversations this commission has had about how we treat one group of protesters versus how we treat another group of protesters, and was I put the caution out there, or the thinking, especially for our law enforcement individuals here on our call, who have been good partners in having these conversations with us, is that how do we make sure that what happened in DC and how groups were treated does not happen here? If me and my daughter decide to go on the steps of the county and we're protesting, are we going to be safe? Just like certain protesters were safe, you know, in DC, and certain protesters were not safe in DC. So I just put that out to think about, like, as we bring this home, how do we, and I know, and I'm not doing this as a critique of our current law enforcement and our policy. It's just something for us to continue to actively think about,
Yes.
because it cannot happen here. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Commissioner Anaya. Any other comments?
Madam Chair, I don't see other hands up, but it looks like people's videos, at least on my screen, are having some video issues, but I don't see any other hands up.
Okay. Okay, let's go on to our next agenda item.
Madam Chair, the next agenda item, number 5, is the development of the mission statement for the Office of Equity and Racial Justice, where today's discussion is an update and discussion items. The consultant is going to provide us an update on the ongoing process and what lies ahead as part of the process for developing the mission statement. I believe many of you have had one-on-ones and have had some interviews with our consultants, and I'd like to now turn it over to Jess Chacon and her team from UPD and OBI for their presentation.
Thank you, Claudia.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Thank you, Claudia. I'm actually going to just open with similar comments from people I work with at the Research Institute, who would like to echo so many of the things that were just said by many of the commissioners. The name of our institute is Othering and Belonging. And we recognize that people hold together at the same time those conflicting histories of harm and aspirations for what we can be building together. Not just, we'll talk today about the status updates of a contact sheet for the office and technical matters, but it's been really rewarding for us. You know, and our other work that we do with other local governments and with other civic engagement organizations to really be so appreciative and heartened by the work that you all are taking on and have been engaging with so long. We've had such amazing conversations to hear the history of organizing and taking care of groups. And I was on a call last night with civic engagement organizers who'd been working in the South broadly, and the joy that was expressed alongside and at the same time as this anger and fear that was going on yesterday. They were holding joy at the same time, because there'd been in the South an unprecedented expansion of enfranchisement. And that's something that exceeds partisan politics. It's a thing we really hold joy for beyond and beyond many other languages that people talk about this work in. So just wanted to kind of ground our presentation in thinking about the gravity and the potential of this office, so that when we move on to the discussion today, that to understand that we grasp the profound efforts and appreciation for what we're doing. And Guadalupe wanted to also kind of ground us in this discussion as well.
Hello, everyone. Just to expound on what Wendy was saying, really this is the work right here, us connecting to each other, us hearing each other. Commissioner Anaya, I'm emotional too, and I was on text messaging with various groups that work in this space from Michigan and Kentucky and Pennsylvania and Kansas City and you know, processing. And it occurred to me too that it would be a good time from the interviews that we've been able to conduct so far. We've learned so much about you individually, and we were already impressed by reading the your bios, but seriously, it takes our breath away. It's really refreshing to see the work that you're doing. And what we're going to be talking about today in opening up this office, which really couldn't be at a better time, is taking that work that you do and creating a tool and creating a process, creating an office that we will, you know, that you will carry on with. And so we just wanted to pause for a moment and ask that. I'm sure all of our minds are full, right? They're full not only with our busy schedules, but with what happened yesterday. And so in the honor and of taking some self-care, what I ask if we could just take 3 deep breaths together. And when we take these deep breaths, as we breathe in, as you breathe out, I would like you to think about, as you breathe in and breathe out, remembering a time, a place, a space where you felt that sense of belonging, where you feel welcomed. Because I know based on the interviews we've had, that's definitely what we want this office to be, right? That we're hearing the office to be is to be someplace, a resource. HRC is a resource. So let's just take a few minutes to decompress, take a few deep breaths, change that chemistry in our body so we can begin this, the continuing on this work that we're doing together and being mindful of the work. So with that, I'll go ahead and I'll count to 1, 2, 3, and we'll breathe in, and then I'll just breathe out. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, breathe in. And breathe out. Again, breathe in. And breathe out. Final time, releasing any stress or love into the world. Breathe in. And breathe out. And I just meant releasing your stress, not putting stress into the world, and love. And then I was reminded of a quote by Margaret Wheatley, and it says, "There is no power for change greater than a community discovering what it cares about. Very great change starts from very small conversations held among people who care."
Yeah, thank you for hitting a nice context around this in response to the urgency, Guadalupe. We wanted to start with, we had planned to do this, some more robust introductions of ourselves as a team. And so some of these are more lighthearted. So we really wanted before to think more deeply about this. Jess, can you share the first one? That's my life, my story. So I was raised and grew up in rural central Ohio. So a lot of my continued work is continuing to look at the increasing diversity of rural areas and increasing needs and shifting economies of othering processes that are happening based on race and ethnicity and immigration and all of the changing landscapes on rural politics, especially under COVID. There's been you know, with the meatpacking industry, there's been so much attention brought to that. So I carry a kind of personal history along with that work, which has led me to be interested in lots of social movements organizing on food justice issues around farm worker rights, labor rights more generally. Like one of those marches I was at was a protest for a retrograde house, the state house bill for labor organizing. The picture of me as a young girl is something that I've been asking. I've always had that look on my face, and I still do frequently. When I'm just kind of like stunned and thinking, what is going on here? Like that was another scene of that. Somehow this kitten had climbed up to the very, very high top of the straw bale. So that's that kind of like interest and curiosity and trying to understand has always been a part of my life. The only time I've lived outside of Ohio full-time was again learning from communities who've been organizing a very long time. I lived in Bethlehem in the West Bank in Palestine for a while, doing work with immigration and forced immigration policies and international law around that. So again, kind of developing an interest around and a dedication to these issues. My quarantine companion has been my new puppy, who you unfortunately might hear in the background during one of the portions of our presentation today. Guadalupe, I think you're next.
Okay. Oh, no, Jess is next.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I believe it's Guadalupe's next, but your slide, we haven't updated.
Oh, okay. Oh, oops. Okay, well. I grew up in a small community named Lorain, so Lorain, Ohio, which was the most diverse community in Ohio for a long time, and what drew immigrants to, I don't see my pictures though, what drew immigrants to Lorain was the shipyards. Lorain was extremely important to the U.S. Because it had a bridge, which I always demonstrate. The bridge opens, and with that bridge opening, it allowed ship freighters to come from, you know, all parts of the world into the U.S. And so it brought steel. So the steel mill, the shipyards, and the automotive industry is what drew immigrants to that community. I've shared with some of you that my uncle was the first Hispanic principal in Ohio and created the first bilingual school system. And so community development, community work is definitely a part of my life and has been all along, just due to my relationship with my family and the work my family's done. As an adult, I lived in New York and Chicago and the suburbs of Detroit, and then eventually Toronto, and then moved to Central Ohio. And what I learned along the way is diversity is definitely quality of life for me. And I think that it is for a lot of people. And so while sometimes it's the bike paths, right, and other kind of infrastructure that creates quality of life, it really early on I learned that diversity was what that meant to me. I then worked for the mayor for the city of Columbus, first beginning as an advocate as a Latino liaison, but then working with nonprofits to develop policies with the hospitals in Central Ohio, talking to them, this was in 1995, talking to them about their obligation to adhere to Title VI, and then the enforcement. So it took 3 years to go through that project of educating, raising awareness, enforcing that they follow this, and then also creating standards for interpreters and training interpreters. And so that was a collaboration with Jewish Family Services, Asian American Community Services, the Ohio Hispanic Coalition, Somali Women and Children. And so collaboration and community organizing began in Central Ohio for me in 1995, and again, then being appointed to be the mayor of the city's New Americans Initiative, and then eventually assistant director of the Community Relations Commission. And my work there was to oversee the commission, in addition to overseeing programs like My Brother's Keeper, our MLK March and Luncheon, Prayer Luncheon, and Welcome Week. And so unfortunately, my pictures aren't there to show, but I definitely have a deep passion for this work, and then eventually became a co-founder and president of Vibrant Ohio, and that is where we work as a state with the major cities in Ohio to, focus on skilled immigrants, and how can we make that pathway for a skilled immigrant, someone who has an international degree, to be able to utilize their degrees in the state of Ohio. And that's been about a 6-year project, working with the Ohio Department of Higher Ed, and then also working with the governor's office so that he could open an Office of Opportunity of New Americans to focus on this work. So the California already has one, and so we looked at what other cities. There's only about seven states in the U.S. that have this office. We have a new governor now, and I've been working there diligently on the minority strike force as it relates to COVID-19, and we provided 33 recommendations for them for him to follow, or for the state to follow. And in general, the pictures that you see are just going to the Women's March 4 years ago, and to the left are the pictures of our Welcome Week luncheon. I had the pleasure of meeting the Supreme Court Justice Sotomayor. And for 10 years, I've been actively engaged in putting on our city's International Women's Day. And then I was the project manager for a report called The Impact of Refugees in Central Ohio. And that whole point of that report was for us to create the narrative of how we wanted to, like as a community, highlight and showcase and work with and uplift the diversity of our community, and really the positive impact that immigrants and refugees bring to our community. And so that's a little bit about myself. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Guadalupe. All right, so I'm Jess Chacon. So I'll start on the right corner, top corner. I'm actually from El Paso, Texas, so I'm very familiar with living in a border town. I grew up there, could probably walk to Mexico from my mom's house in about 2 minutes, so very close to the border. It's something that I think about a lot, and I was the first person in my family to go to college. I got a scholarship to the University of Texas at Austin, so I'm a very proud Longhorn. And I just think about the life-changing impact that education can have. Education is like a huge part of my life. Because I went to college, then my brother also ended up going to the same college on a scholarship as well. And just thinking about the impact that like educators have. I remember having a teacher when I was in 2nd grade telling me, "You're gonna go to college." And that was just like the first time somebody had told me something like that. My background is I grew up with a single mom. Not very good public schools. My dad was in and out of prison. So for me to hear from educators like, "You're going to be able to do this," was really special, and it was a safe place for me. So school was just a space for me that I felt like I really did well. And I now, looking back, thinking about how that was great for me, but it was also really unfair for the other folks. I was one of the only people that went to college in my neighborhood. Actually, the only person in my neighborhood that went to college. And so just thinking about that when I was in college made me want to be a teacher. So actually I taught middle school in Philadelphia, and then I moved to California literally for no reason, just did. And I was in Oakland. So I was in Oakland for the last 15 years as a middle school teacher. And as you can see in the bottom left corner, those two, that was a college graduation I was invited to from two of my former 8th grade students. And so it's just really special to see. They graduated from UC Santa Barbara. And it was really special that I was able to still keep in contact with them so many years later. And that was a special graduation ceremony that was Latino, Latina focused. And so they were able to bring their families up on stage. Everything was in English and Spanish. It was really beautiful to see. And because I wanted to make a larger impact, I actually became a principal. So I was a principal of an elementary school in East Oakland for 7 years. And so the top left corner are some of my students, and really learned a lot with elementary about the importance of social emotional learning and mental health at a very young age. And so the work I did a lot at my school, we actually created a behavioral health program and was really focused on designing for the margins. And that was really eye-opening for me to think about when we provide for our students who are the most vulnerable, everyone benefits. And so later became an assistant superintendent in the Bay Area and started those programs across several elementary schools and was working on middle schools as well and high schools. And also as an assistant superintendent, I led all the DEI work for our region, for our principals and for our assistant principals, and led our Black Students Thrive project, where we worked on the schools that had the most predominantly Black students and worked together to give them extra funding because we need to be able to support equitably, not equitably. And so most recently, I moved back to Austin. And in the middle picture there, you see my siblings. I'm very, very close with my family. I'm a middle child. And at the bottom right corner, you see the reason I moved here is my nephew. He is adorable, so I can't get enough of him. So basically, was a pretty good reason to leave California and the beautiful weather to come for those cheeks. So that's me, and now I'm working with UPD. So. Oh, sorry, Priya.
Thanks, Jess. Hi, everyone. I've met some of you. My name is Priya Shankar, and I'm a consultant with UPD. Like Jess, I live in Austin right now, and I'm actually born in Austin. I'm native Austinite, and my background is in well-being work and anti-racism research and policy. Some of the organizations that I've done research for and some of the schools I've gone to are on the right side, but my primary focus has been thinking about how to create learning environments, cultural environments in which all students and people can thrive, in which they're liberatory and also equitable. And so some of the identity intersections that are important to me are being an Austinite, but also my parents were immigrants, so that is a factor that's always been part of my upbringing, being here and going to India. And so it's been a great experience to be able to really understand the local issues that are important to Austin. I do a lot of volunteer work for the food bank through some of the conservation work. You can see in the middle picture doing some gardening there, as well as anti-racism and justice work within the community, but also keeping in mind the sort of larger global context in which we operate and balancing those two tensions. So thank you for story, or you can jump into some of the content now.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you also for being patient with us to share who we are with you. We all know that everything is based on relationships, and we just wanted to share the intersections of where we all meet in doing this work. And so with that, I would like to discuss a pivot that we will be, we're going to do in terms of our timeline. I mentioned earlier that I oversaw My Brother's Keeper program, and we brought an organization called Driven Foundation. They are two football players, Ohio State football players, that have a foundation to work with the community. And in one of their presentations, it always stuck with me that they talked about with football players. And I have this I have a soccer ball here, so it's in any kind of sports, but I couldn't find my football, is they talk about that you get the ball, right? And then the receiver shifts. So that's what we're going to be doing in this sense with, we're still on schedule, we're still on plan, but we are shifting and pivoting at this real critical moment, because as we started to do interviews with each of you, and started to request information about the tool that we are using, the invite list, to begin this process, we realized that it was more than just an invite list, and in fact a tool that your organization, I mean HRC and the Office of Race and Justice will be able to utilize in the future. And we really wanted to make sure that before we move forward, that we get this right, that the list is as comprehensive as could be. And, you know, of course, with the support and advice and conversations with, I'm going to say, our dear Elizabeth Bustos, who, you know, we had her take a look at the list as we were moving forward. And then, of course, with Claudia and Andrew. And again, there was this awareness that we are missing certain sections in that invite list, certain regions and representation. And so we're going to talk about that further on in this presentation. But I wanted to just take a moment to acknowledge that we are shifting, and the area where we're shifting is in time. And so the baseline meeting that was scheduled for January 29th will be, it was scheduled for January 14th, is now going to be January 29th. And so as you see, I know that we've shared this flow chart with you in the past, and this is the most current and updated, up-to-date chart. What you do is critical. Your input to ensuring that we're reaching the right people and including everyone that needs to be included. That's really important. And so what our plan is we will, we're going to go over it a little more in detail, as I said, a little further down in the presentation, and we're going to ask that you submit any additional names or names to the list, and we will be very specific about it by the end of business tomorrow, so that we may be able to look at the list with the ad hoc committee on Monday, and then send out the invite to the community. And let me see. Yes, and so that will give almost more than 2 weeks and just a day short of 3 weeks for that invite.
You want me to go ahead a little bit?
Yes, please.
Great. So just as Guadalupe mentioned, we've talked to many of you, and we're in the process of still scheduling with a few of you. And so just, you know, I sent an email out on Tuesday. If you want to meet with Wendy and Guadalupe, just send me the times that you're available so that we can coordinate. And we want to have those meetings done by the end of next week. And then just wanted to talk through so far from that contribution list. We've gotten so many, 105 organizations and people. And then we have had contributions from 4 commissioners and 3 county staff. And we've just had so many additions since this Monday. Something that we wanted to get from you is we really want to make sure everyone is represented. And so we would love for you to have, again, 5 to 10 additional organizations and contact people by tomorrow. And you can just like send us that list with their contact information using it, or you can use the Google Sheet that we've sent. And we want to just make sure that we have representation from different spots that we haven't seen yet. And so I know we're going to talk about that in a second. Wendy, did you want to go over this part? Do you want me to do it?
I can take over this. You'll get the sense that this has been our fixation for the last for the last couple of weeks. So we, again, like initially we were thinking of gathering names for the baseline meeting, for the focus groups, etc. But it's become like really clear that this is a really great opportunity to provide you all with a tool for the commission and for the office going forward. If we really make it as robust as we'd like to, both for the purposes of creating the mission statement, but also for the ongoing work that the commission and that the office can be doing. So we wanted to walk through what the sheet looks like that we'll be sending you, that we've already sent out, that you maybe have already seen. But this is what it looks like. So you'll click on the link. We'll go to this Google Sheet, works just like Excel. And then you just input the information. So pretty straightforward. Organization. If you can put in your name, that you're the person who's adding that in case we need to follow up on anything. The name, title, or the association someone has with the organization, whether that's, sometimes it'll be, you know, we've seen people adding staff members, sometimes it's an executive director, sometimes it's someone on the board. So just so we have a sense of exactly what the connection is to the institution. And then if it's relevant, hopefully we can just get this field always filled about which community or neighborhood is attached to that organization. I understand some of them are probably going to be like the whole county or Southern California or something much broader. But if you can provide some information in that column, that would be really helpful. Email, of course. The next slide is we're asking you to weigh in on what you think the best role for that contact would be. So we've talked before about the process and flow for the project. Part of that is for us to be doing this baseline meeting that's coming up at the end of January now. There's also this focus group. The third piece is a community survey. So I just wanted to review what those are again, so that you all are able to really make the judgment about which people are best suited with the skill sets for those three sections. So on this next slide, it's the basic overview. So at the baseline meeting that's coming up at the end of this month, and at the Horizon meeting, those are going to be connected. So if someone RSVPs for baseline, they're also getting invited and really trying to get them to turn out for the Horizon meeting as well, because both of those are connected to a direct process of creating and designing the mission statements. And you know, the first one of the baseline meeting will be going over in great detail in breakout groups, the best practices, literature review, which you'll see today. We'll be previewing that today. We'll also be doing a deep dive into information that we'll preview for you at the next HRC meeting, which is based on a review of the work and the major issues within the county and efforts that have happened to address those and how they relate to local government, specifically county government. So both those are the conversations we're having at the baseline. Horizon will be asking folks, what does the mission look like? We'll have defined what the best practices would be for the general review and examples of that. And then at the baseline also saying, well, what do you think your best practices would be for this office? We're taking that information into the Horizon, where we'll be saying these are the languages, this is what we want reflected in the mission statement. So that's kind of the really substantive engagement that Baseline Horizon is having. So if you recommend and say that this person, this organization, yes, definitely needs to be there, maybe, you know, would be a good person, or definitely no, you have those three options. There's a similar option for the focus group and the survey. Focus groups will happen after Horizon, where we'll have the first draft of the mission statement. We'll have focus groups to work on things that are closer to wordsmithing. It'll still be working with some concepts and values and principles, but there'll be a lot of wordsmithing work. So it's kind of a different skill set. So it's not to say that someone will have less influence or that the focus groups are less important because it's after the first draft, but it's to say that there's a specific skill set that's really useful for people to be turning out for that work in the focus group section. We'll also be doing the survey. So we'll have that first draft of the mission statement, turning that to focus groups, also turning that to a survey. The survey will obviously be something that can be much more widely distributed and have a much greater input on from for everyone that you end up putting on this engagement list. So that's why it's really a priority for us to get that fleshed out as much as we possibly can to make sure different sectors are represented, different geographies, different focus issues. The next slide is going to tell you some of the patterns that we've already seen. And the list we're taking, each of you are going to be filling out or have already filled out a form where it's blank and you all are just adding in your recommendations. We've been aggregating that into a really large list, and we've been working with folks to give us feedback on what it looks like. So right now we have representation for organizations on a lot of these columns. I'm not going to read everything on that list because the next slide is for us more important right now, which is making a very specific ask for you all to provide, if you already have. So maybe take another look, make sure you don't have anyone else to add, or if you haven't added yet, just to make sure we do. 5 to 10 contacts added to these sheets. If you can do more, that's awesome. From having talked to you, a lot of you are involved in these coalitions, interfaith coalitions with like 65 people, or you're a board member of a group that works with 10 people as grantees, or examples like that. If you would like to provide that additional information, we really, really welcome it. Again, it's useful for this process, this project. Going forward, it'll be a really powerful tool for you all. So, considering that we're making this specific ask to definitely get at least 5 to 10 from each of you, there are priority areas that we have on the last slide. Jess, go back one. Yes, so the ask, 5 to 10 contacts. The priority areas that we list below are ones that are more like a gap in the full list we have right now. So we'll take your recommendations in any sector, but we definitely want to add to the list private organizations. The second is health services, especially and including mental health services. A cluster around programs and organizations and people who are working on youth programming, youth-focused programming. Sometimes that's associated with mentoring or leadership development. Leadership development more generally is also really valuable. Workforce development, environmental justice is something we need more of. And then also we want to make sure we're getting a lot of geographic diversity from all of the different districts. Right now, a couple areas that we're seeing are kind of lightly covered are east and south of the county. So kind of keep that in the mind, in the background as you're adding people to the list. As Guadalupe pointed out, we want to try to get the invitations out Tuesday morning at the latest, maybe Monday afternoon. And so if you can fill these out by the end of day Friday, that will be the most useful for us. We're going to be meeting with your ad hoc committee on Monday, and we're going to ask them to do the same process. Has this been fleshed out enough that there's not these remaining gaps? Are we having these geographic communities represented? So on Monday, we'll be having that additional analysis done for you wonderful souls who have lined up to be your ad hoc committee as well for us. So that's the very long pitch and explanation of how we're going to continue this development of a tool. Are there any questions? And also when we send out the email, don't hesitate to phone us or call us on email if you want to be able to just send the stuff over email, text, if there's any complications you've encountered with Google Sheets. But yeah, feel free to reach out to us if there's any difficulties you have in getting that information to us. We're happy to do it in any different format that might be more easily accessed for you as well.
Commissioner Evans, I have a question. Right now, my machine seems to be acting up. But in terms of an organization, can an organization have 2 people involved with this? For instance, one member of the organization may be excellent as a contact for the base and horizon line, and another person within that organization may be excellent for the focus group. Perfect. Is that possible? And yeah, if so, how do you how do you eliminate them on the form?
I would just copy a line, like on one line, put the same organization name. You'll just have 2 lines for the organization. So it'll look repetitive, but once we get down to the name of the contact, it'll be different. Once you start recommending them for different meetings, that'll look different as well. So we'll be able to see that there's different people within the same organization. So just make a separate line item for each person.
Thank you.
That's a great question. Thank you.
I think Warsan, Member Arton has her hand up, and Member Perez had her question answered.
Great.
I have a question very similar to Member Evans' question. Because I guess when I was filling out the document, it was very difficult for me to choose yes, definitely, or if needed, and or like not necessary. I don't know what the third option was, like not necessary or whatever it might have been. Because to me, it seemed like what makes sense is that, for example, if a member from a specific organization is involved in the baseline and horizon meetings, then hopefully they will be able to, similar to what was suggested before me, that they may be able to send someone else to be part of the focus group. And as for the survey, I would hope that the organizations would share the survey with their members. So to me, kind of saying not necessary or like if needed is kind of limiting the amount of people we're able to reach. And I guess along those same lines, is the survey going to be open to the public? Or are we looking to survey specific groups of people? Because if it is open to the public, then I would assume that we want to encourage organizations to share the survey with all their members.
Right. Again, like great question. I'm glad the questions coming up are like, y'all are definitely thinking through all this. So that's awesome. Excited to see who's gonna, the additions that are gonna come in. So the first part of your question was, what if there's 2 people for an organization? We just discussed that one. The second part was some technical questions around the survey. We do want to circulate the survey as widely as possible. So we will be sending out the survey to organizations and asking them to circulate it through their networks as appropriate and as they follow their unique processes. And we will be sending it out to you all, for example, if you all have a private address list or address contact list, you'd like to do that. So we're hoping for that to circulate as widely as possible. What we'll be doing from this list for the survey is sending it to the organizations and the individuals that you've listed as contacts for those organizations. So it'll be kind of a snowball process, but we'll be reaching out to, again, yourselves, ad hoc, and organizations on this list to make sure that it then gets distributed by those organizations.
Thank you.
I don't believe we see any other hands up at this time.
Okay, that's great. Thanks so much. And then Priya has done a lot of the piece of best practices. So we're going to preview that for you. We obviously are going to end up having a lot of questions and conversations, potential for more details. What we're really wanting to prioritize in the discussion and feedback today is what feedback you have for us to take and respond to as we prepare further for the baseline meeting. So when we pause for questions and clarifications, we might not provide the full answer because we definitely want to get through this session, but we'll take those questions, respond to the ones that are going to be keeping on time with what we have today, but also taking those questions in and making sure we respond to those as we go forward and continue to use this material with baseline. So I'm turning it over to Jess. There we go. Thank you.
Can everyone hear me?
Awesome. Yep.
Great. So y'all have actually seen this slide, but this is sort of an orientation of how we approach the best practices review. And so you can see here that we have our primary question, which is really looking at how other cities and other counties have approached their setting up their Office of Racial Justice. And within this question, we both looked specific to California. We also looked at cities and counties across the nation, and also places of international interest that hold similar patterns to San Diego. So those that might be accommodating large numbers of foreign residents, for example. And then within that, we looked at places that have already been highlighted by key organizations that do this work. So we've mentioned GARE, which is the Government Alliance on Race and Equity. They've already sort of looked and do a lot of this good work with many places, as well as some of the other organizations that are listed here. And then the last chunk of information sort of highlights some places that we paid specific attention to, and I'll highlight this within the presentation, but these are some factors, of course, out of many other contextual elements that are specific to San Diego County, including it being a transporter metropolis, the high homelessness rate, the high number of foreign-born residents, cities and counties that have a similar population size, and then other places that might have population growth due to historically marginalized groups. And so on the next slide, this is a sort of a collation of all of the research that we've done into some key best practices. And so I'm going to review this sort of as an outline right here, but then we'll jump into looking at how different cities and counties have actually done this work across these 5 key best practices. So first we have normalizing racial equity as a key value. And so we've found in our research that local governments that use racial equity frameworks that really clearly articulate what racial equity means, how that relates to their unique contexts, different language and terminology usage around implicit and explicit bias, the differences between individual, institutional, and structural justice, and a vision of racial equity that is really informed by those who've been most affected by the history of inequity within that city or county. And so being really deliberate about understanding how, what the community needs are, and using that as a roadmap for setting up the Office of Racial Justice. Second, we have the importance of building a cross-departmental infrastructure. And this is also just speaking again to why we've really been looking to hear from you on the organizations that are important to include within this baseline meeting, because we know that for an Office of Racial Justice to be successful, it depends on what the interdependence looks like across the county itself. And so this really involves also developing relationships across city departments and understanding those different power dynamics between those city departments itself and the history of the equity work within the county. And so building from a place of what are some potential allies to this work, what are opposition to this work, what are the different ways that we can scaffold this to really ensure success for the whole community. Third, we have applying a racial equity lens to analysis. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this right now. I'll jump into it when we open it up on the slide. But this is looking at different ways that data can inform the work, and we have some examples there that I'll touch on in a minute. Fourth, again, this sort of speaks to the importance of what we just talked about, of really understanding the needs of the communities, which means making sure that communities are part of this process from, the mission statement development to planning the key goals, to then creating the strategic plan, and then coming back to community continually throughout the process. And so it's really necessary to be able to have those resources up front so that those folks are being included throughout the whole process. And we found that offices who are most successful have been doing this and do so in a very intentional way. Last, Also reflecting the racial diversity of the communities within the local governments themselves, both in terms of contracting and workforce. And this is again using data to both develop workforce pipelines and then building that capacity throughout the contracting efforts. And so on the next slide, I'm just going to jump into some examples of how we've seen cities do this best. And so first we'll take a look at the California example, and y'all can also feel free to poke around on the slide deck and click the hyperlinks, which really will provide more nuanced information to how this actually looks across the different places. So within Oakland, one of the key best practices that they have is they've really developed some great language for what equity looks like and what the change process looks like and what assumptions they are working from. And so again, that really depends on the context in which they are living in and how that informs their work going forward. Second, we're looking at Detroit. Again, really importantly, they have created a common language and defining their terms across diversity versus inclusion. There's a lot of language out there, and for offices to be successful, we found that it's really important to define the terms to create that landscape across different departments to then be able to really track progress that way. Portland is a great example that we'll jump into in more detail in a little bit. They do a fabulous job of articulating the community's unique history and also especially paying attention to how the government has played a role in creating these inequities and not being shy to expose those and acknowledge those. Tulsa is another example that I'll talk a little bit more in a bit. They again point to how the history of racial tension within their community is how that sets the actionable roadmap for their work. And then, as I spoke to just earlier, we also looked at some international examples, which I'll detail in a bit, but Rwanda is one of them. Next slide. Great. So one of our second best practices is really building cross-collaborative efforts and creating buy-in across different departments. We'll walk through King County as well as Seattle in a bit to show you how they've structured their Office of Racial Justice so that it's supported across departments. So it's sitting and there's a change team that operates across the different initiatives that are touching on racial equity and justice. And then San Jose and El Paso are other two good examples, and we're actually speaking to both people from both these offices to understand more information about them. While they're both newer initiatives, El Paso is an example of a transporter city that has successfully focused on the dimension of policing, which we know is an issue of great importance to San Diego County, by bringing together 5 critical city departments. So we're going to be unpacking that in greater detail with them. And San Jose, which we were referred to look at by one of our ad hoc committee members, is a city that leads in innovation, of course, in California. And it interestingly has its new office being housed under the Office of Immigrant Affairs, which also makes a lot of sense given the number of foreign-born residents that they have. Moving to the next slide, we'll look at the importance of applying a racial equity lens to data. And so these are 3 great examples. There's many cities, San Diego including being one of them as well, that are using data, whether it's disaggregating their data, spatial analysis, using various dashboards to both track outcomes for community of colors and then create decisions and actions around them. And so I'm just gonna quickly highlight these. Oakland, again, being one of them. They have a great tool called the Racial Equity Outreach Solution, which uses locational intelligence. Multnomah in Oregon, they have created a great equity empowerment lens, which is interesting because it's really about deconstructing what is not working around racial equity and healing and thinking about how to transform structures, environments, and individuals through the use of process-oriented approaches, not just product-oriented approaches. And finally, I put up here Madison, Wisconsin, which is a great example of a city that uses an equity profile. There's many cities that do this, but this is interesting because they use both population level data, which is very common. San Diego does that as well as community surveys, community dialogue sessions to show how these populations are affected by societal change. And all of these cities are also part of GARE. So moving to the next principle we have is co-creating with communities. And here I'm just going to focus on Tulsa, actually. And a great piece of what Tulsa did here is that they really set up their Office of Racial Justice in a way to guide their strategic plans. So they have a steering committee, which includes 14 community members from different backgrounds, as well as a racial equity advisory committee, which includes 23 community leaders. And then the actual development of their strategic plan was based in an agenda setting workshop that engaged different community members. So this is a great example of a place that was very thoughtful and intentional about creating working groups and creating opportunities to co-create with communities from the very beginning of their mission development, all through the way of developing actionable initiatives. Next slide. Another key best practice is looking at reflecting the racial diversity in contracting workforce. And this is not necessarily explicit to standing up an Office of Racial Justice and Equity, but it's really, of course, important to think about as this office expands and as hiring and contracting expands. And so to accomplish this, as I was mentioning, it's really about creating workforce pipelines and building the capacity to achieve contracts to actually reflect the racial diversity within the community. And we'll jump into this in a little bit, but Seattle again provides an example of how that's being done. So now I'm actually going to pause. I know that was a lot of information, but we tried to provide a way to show you some of the key best practices with some examples that go hand in hand. So we'll pause there and gather any questions.
I'm not seeing any raised hands at this point.
I'll also say we also are looking for any comments around things we want to be sure we're looking at that you feel are more urgent that we haven't addressed in the committee, or yeah, questions and comments. Thank you.
I don't see any at this point. There may be some more questions when you go into your deeper dive into the specific jurisdictions.
Sounds good, thank you.
All right, so here we're gonna jump into some national California examples as well as some international examples if we have the time, but we really wanna make sure we've covered the national, international, and California specific examples first. And so first we are going to focus on King County. I'm gonna turn it over to Wendy.
Okay, now that I've unmuted myself properly. So King County, for folks involved in government racial equity, sometimes King County is talked about as a pioneer in the field or an ideal model. I think the case is that they were maybe working on this for a longer time. A lot of the principles that have been used in King County are used in other places, so there's a lot of really great examples. So I'm going to update from King County from the point of,
Sorry.
Yes.
Your sound, it seems to be skipping. Does everybody hear that? Or just me? Yeah, if you can do something with your sound. Okay.
Okay, I'll try it. But is this a little bit better?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, all right. My face is very close, but but you can hear me more clearly. So I'm gonna start the King County again. working on these kinds of racial equity issues in government and belonging in government has been working on this for a very long time before they started their Office of Racial Equity formally. When I start discussing King County, I'm going to start from the point of their office being created and the work that was kind of initiating that office. And we can talk if there's questions around what the landscape and what efforts were taken beforehand. So again, a lot of the things that Jess had drawn out, that the Government Alliance on Racial Equity, GARE, a lot of the work from King County has been formalized and now is institutionalized and distributed to governments through that network. So again, King County is influential for that reason. So shared values, kind of new organization 101, like having a shared language and shared vision and establishing what that looks like. King County had created an initiative called One King County. That's happened. I've seen a lot of really great documents on that that seem similar to what San Diego County has done. And that is kind of the establishment of them talking about some of the models that they've used and kind of doing a systemic analysis of the problems and disconnects between community and governments. Can we do the next slide? A lot of text here, which I know is a PowerPoint no-no, so I'll just talk briefly about what started here. So there was a new commissioner that came in 2010. So 2010 is kind of the formal point at which the county started the work. And then the office was established in 2015. When the new office was started, there was one staff person who was dedicated for half time. So it was, again, like a very slow progression of this. I think a lot of cities right now, and counties, your county included, have been able to move much more quickly because there's a different political landscape now. There's a different awareness in communities right now. So that's a really exciting thing to be seeing, that's moving a little bit differently from these longer term projects. And they made sure this new office was structurally connected to other initiatives that had started in the city. So the city had, for example, city ordinance, or I'm sorry, a county ordinance that was established to situate and ground equity and social justice in the county. And then an interbranch team, they called it, which was drawn from a number of different departments to anchor that work. And those were then structurally, formally, in the governance structure of the office, institutionalized where that office is situated. The next slide. So they have, they were able to produce this really beautiful, massive plan. So the different elements of that, it was interesting to hear, like when you all were doing your, the first actions of the meeting today, and I've noticed in the other HRC meetings, there's a lot of the pieces of this that you all have already started talking about doing and establishing the urgency of. So this is a really interesting structure of how some of those pieces can fit together. So they have, as part of this plan, which was put together with over 100 community organizations. I think the number was 117 that they list in the preamble to their report. And then also a great deal of those people involved were from government themselves and from leadership positions in government, which is also really important to establish and demonstrate that there's buy-in from the government at a really substantive level. So that was the theory of change they established. Their theory of change really focused on the idea of targeted universalism, which we talked about at our first meeting together as one of the core principles that our institute led on. And it's really one of the core principles that a lot of people are using now, specifically from government and philanthropy. So there's a lot of governments who have found that framework a really useful, productive way to start doing some strategic planning and institutionalization of offices and set procedure and those tools that if you're involved in government are meant to really create a basis so that there's not a function that government does without channeling through some sort of equity lens. So targeted universalism is a process to do that. We're going to be talking more about that as we continue meeting with you in the ad hoc and at the baseline meetings, etc. The very simple way to describe that, it's difficult in execution and more complicated. But the idea is fairly simple to grasp, which is that we set a universal goal, and it's something that's appealing to a really diverse population of people. And then there's a focus on the very next step being an analysis that shows very different groups are differently situated relative to that goal. Some groups are really far off from reaching that goal. Some groups really close. Some groups are, in between space between achieving that goal, but are having much more extreme forms of suffering. So then there's all of these implementation questions that get really more complicated into the system. But the general idea is that there's a universal goal, an aspiration that the community desires and comes from the community, power sharing ideas and that the community is in charge of articulating what that goal is. And then a really great attention of knowledge that exists in your county from talking to you and studying what's been happening in the history of the county, to start saying, well, how is this group going to reach the goal? How is this group going to reach the goal? And starting to change those structures so that there's greater access to that goal. That is the theory of change that King County uses. So it's a really fundamental structure to the way that their office uses racial equity and the way that that's then distributed as requirements to all of the other departments in the county. They also developed a pro-equity policy agenda. And again, this is institutionalizing the practice within different departments of the county government. The work is anchored in the office. So the office is the leader and the resource that other departments can guide. Those are the dimensions of attention that the office distributes access and resources to help the departments work through those matters. The online appendix for this document is massive. All of those different appendices are really important, even though they're called appendices. So there was a 3-year implementation plan for all of the different goals. A community engagement report that again was accomplished through a series of meetings with over 100 organizations. And then something that sounds similar to what you all discussed at the opening of your meeting, which was looking at employee engagement report. It was interesting to hear some of your other discussions earlier that talked about not just having an exclusively internal focused lens for the office, but to start looking at how the office can also become the conduit for community needs to be coming into the government, the county government, and then for the county government to be able to also then be able to help departments navigate that connection more smoothly, to have the community understand more clearly what the government can be providing so it can be a really valuable conduit. And that's how it works in King County. The county, part of realizing that effort as a conduit model, they had organized through the office something they called the Regional Equity Collaborative. So all of these community organizations that cooperated on co-creating the plan of co-creating the theory of change, co-creating this universal goal or a set of universal goals in some cases. Those are the tools through which there was a power sharing. So it's a way to materialize what often is an aspiration, but doesn't have a lot of follow-up through how that implicates structural design of an office, for example. So these, again, targeted universalism is a way to really concretize these important goals of power sharing and all of these different goals and aspirations that have been coming through discussions for you all. So this is the way King County came up with that. They created a collaborative structure that, again, the office took control of and created, and then is the conduit for that. And then they've organized all of this according to 6 goal areas. So when I was referring to these universal goals, the community set them, this regional collaborative, these over 100 organizations. The 6 goal areas were established for the department to run, for the department to then translate that into the government, and then also for those goals to have been articulated by the community. So that's a way in which there's a meaningful sharing of power that sometimes is absent from governments, and as a really meaningful conduit, again, for the community. Next slide, please. So again, they had a really great graphic, a very Seattle, Pacific Northwest, a lot of tree imagery they have going on. What they've done in this graphic is to break down the components of their theory of change. And we feel like this is a really important aspect that was on that best practices list that Priya shared, that's been really important. And a lot of the work that we've done with different folks is to think of different terms that are used so that there's not confusion of concepts. So this tree kind of discusses what we mean when we talk about inequities, what we mean when we talk about structural racism, so that there's not someone else dictating the definition of those terms, that the communities create these terms in coordination with government, government actors who are involved in those conversations as well, so that the definitions are really specific, but also very organic with what people have been talking about and what popular understanding is, so that they're not esoteric, like high-minded goals that people are gathering from literature and other places or things like that. So they're really concrete, but also very clear, so that when people come into the government and they have their onboarding process, they can use this document. Community meetings, this kind of language is used to reflect. So that's one of the best practices that they've used and how they've organized that. Next slide, please. It's been really useful for them to also come up with a visual metaphor of how they engage this work. The starting place for them, which was really important, Ron Sims was one of the county directors who came in and really led this work, and he was a former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. So he had a really strong policy background and a dedication to racial equity and really important policy contexts. That being said, the reason this government initiative started years ago, before any of this even showed up on the map, like we talked about in 2010, they had the city ordinance passed, county ordinance passed. And years before that was when Ron Sims had kind of come in and really started a lot of these conversations. And as part of that very early process, there was a really clear reckoning with the county, that the county was acknowledging that their local government, their county government, had been in the past an obstacle, and maybe, and in some cases, the very structural barrier itself to a lot of the problems that the community had, which is a way to an effort to create trust within the community. When we had our first meeting together, John was saying that sometimes it's important to acknowledge that there's just a lack of trust, and to build on that and to be able to engage in that directly. It's not safe to just presume that you can jump in and start working on a landscape of trust, especially when it doesn't exist, especially when there's a longer history of what turn out to be reasonable expectations that communities are left behind in government, that government is not interested in this. It's been really wonderful to hear from some of our interviews that there's a sense that there's a unique moment where communities are learning about what county government can provide, are raising expectations about what county can provide, and then that the government itself, the county government, is also saying, we can respond to this. So it's a really important start to the process that King County, again, felt was really important to start. And again, a basis for structural change that has really blossomed into a beautiful effort. They have it their county now. They worked with the metaphor of the stream, and their government was the upstream.
We're close to time, so we just wanted to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I know. Sorry.
Oh, no, I can talk forever about this stuff. I love it. So thank you for the time check. So we're pausing again here for questions or comments about the direction of some of our work that we've talked about to date on best practices.
Madam Chair, Pedro Anaya, Member Anaya has his hand up.
Okay.
I just have, going back to the beginning of the presentation to now, I have just a couple comments to consider, just things that popped into my head. The first thing is that going all the way back to the giving you guys groups to participate in our process. Don't believe I ever received that link, so just you could resend it. That would be very helpful because I may have missed it in the onslaught of emails that I get, but if you could resend that. But the other thing that came to mind as you were listing kind of like criteria for best practices and a border town and all things, something that just popped into my head is that the other distinction I think we have in the county is that we are a military town in many ways, and that in itself carries some good, for our diversity, but it also creates some challenges. And so I would recommend if looking at some models or best practices.
Denise give you back.
Looking at some models that may have that type of military presence, because historically, the state of California, you go back all the way to the Zoot Suit riots, right, and the impact the military has had on California. I'm not saying we've had that since then like that, but there is an impact and how our community are affected by military presence, again, good and bad. So I want to throw that out there. And then the last thing I'm kind of shooting all these examples is, and we're trying to do in our county in San Diego, is I feel there's a lot of efforts going on right now, and we're a little disjointed. And the examples I'll give, we have this office that's being created. We have our commission that's trying to find its footing and who we are and what we are. I see our county supervisors are putting out other efforts. I know, I brought it up to Claudia about a future presentation in regards to Supervisor Fleck Vargas are bringing forth a public health crisis document or initiative or something to be discussed at a future board meeting. That and I see all these efforts happening, and I think they're all positive efforts. I'm just having a hard time how all these are connecting, and how we are all part of that. And so as we look at models, just looking at ways to bring all these good efforts together and how they all play together, and taking a look at who we are and what is being attempted, because I just think there's a lot of conversations happening and it's timely, but it feels a little disjointed. So I'll just leave that on the table for you guys to consider as you move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's excellent feedback. I just want to point out that all of that was superb. Thank you for that.
I do not see any other hands raised at this point.
This is Commissioner Nash. I have a comment. One thing that we really need to consider, and I don't think I heard it, is the issue around affordability, wage gap. I mean, San Diego cost of living, quality of life is being, we're being priced out, particularly underserved communities. So, and there are other cities and that are also in the same situation. So I think when we're creating a comparison, and you did a great job with best practices, but I really need us to, if it's possible, to include similarly situated cities that we have similar challenges around affordability. I mean, and priced out our kids who we thought we did everything right as parents, sending them to college and doing the right thing, they're priced out of the market and they're leaving San Diego to go to other areas, which is again impacting people of color, particularly in regards to data and representation and the whole thing. So I really think it's important that when you are doing, you know, comparisons, let's just be real. We got to look at the fact that we're being priced out of San Diego.
Thank you for that. And we did hear that loud and clear from our interviews to date. And we will be presenting the kind of like an overview of what we've heard in the future, in a future meeting. So thank you for bringing that up as it relates to our best practices work. But I want you to know that we have been hearing that from all of you as well.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I do not see any other hands raised.
Okay. All right. Well, let's give this great team we have a round of applause for the great work that you're doing. We're really excited. It is needed. It is timely. It's more timely than we ever thought it would be, given the status that's going on in our country and in our city. So I see the value of it. I see it as important. In fact, I see it overlaps with a lot of work that is being done at the city, particularly the city of San Diego. So it's going to be a great foundation built that will help us all move forward in San Diego. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, team, for that presentation.
Yeah, it's great.
Madam Chair, we're ready for the next item, if you're ready.
Okay. Sure. Yes. Yes.
Agenda item 6 was a matter that was requested at the December 15th commission meeting to have a discussion regarding requesting a study of the demographics of boards, commissions, and committees. Next slide. We did want to bring to the commission's attention, what we do know is we provided 2 links for some existing studies that are focused on boards and commissions throughout the regions, but not necessarily the county's boards, commissions, and committees. We have not identified a study specific to the county's boards, commissions, and committees. As you are aware, though, you may recall, we did gather demographic information about the Human Relations Commission as part of its nomination process last summer and into the fall. These are the categories that we gathered, these 6 sectors of information. And as part of the nomination of the commission's process in nominating its members, it reviewed this information to have a representative and reflective commission. Next slide. As you undertake your discussion, if the commission's direction is to study the demographics of the county's boards, commissions, and committees, staff's recommendation would be to ask or request that the CAO direct staff to conduct the study of the demographics for all county boards, commissions, and committees. Staff would work with the clerk of the board, who manages and oversees the boards, commissions, committees, and the staff members who support those boards, commissions, and committees to request the categories of information sought by the commission. Based on the 6 categories we previously gathered, we would move forward with that if that is what you would request, that there's consistency. But we just want to provide you a little bit of that background information and open up to your discussion.
Any comments, commissioners? Well, I have a comment. Given that we raised the issue in regards to demographics, information and workforce study that was raised by the president of the NAACP, Francine Maxwell, this request folds right into that particular request. So I guess the question on the table is, do we do it piecemeal or do we do it holistically? Meaning, do we launch a workforce demographic study that applies to the entire structure of the county? the data is important, and we need to know where we are in terms of the composition of the workforce, contracting, the composition of the different boards and commissions, and where the gaps are. Similar to the approach that we took when we actually created the composition of the commission. So the question on the table is, do we want to do it in a more holistic way, which personally I'm used to from my HR background, or do we do it piecemeal and piecemeal, where to me it wouldn't really make a lot of sense.
I don't understand what you mean by piecemeal.
Piecemeal would be department. This is one category of workforce demographic data. Then we have the workforce data that President Maxwell talked about in terms of the suicidal prevention versus the entire workforce, including commissions and
that
boards.
also, I'm sorry, would that also include what President Francine Maxwell talked about, if you did it holistically?
Yes, yes.
Well, I would be supportive of something more holistic.
This is Commissioner Khoury. My understanding is that this is really a study of the demographics of all County of San Diego boards and commissions, and not only focused on what Sister Maxine asked for. So maybe what we need to do really is take it in parts, i.e. maybe North County, East County, South County, and so on, if we are talking about the same thing. I just wanted to clarify.
We're talking about the same thing. The overall picture, including.
Okay, so.
Yeah. Claudia?
At the December 15th meeting,
we are, sorry, Madam Chair, this is Natalia. Claudia is having technical difficulties. We'll be back shortly. In the meantime, it looks like we have member Anaya with his hand raised.
And Chair, are you looking for are we looking for a motion here of some kind, or is this just something we're going to be discussing? I'm trying to, what's the task at hand?
It's a recommendation to request that this Chief Administrative Officer direct staff to conduct a study of the demographics of all County of San Diego boards and commissions.
Well, but I guess my question is this something we need to vote on as a group, or is it just moving forward? Like,
if it's a motion, then I'll make it as a motion.
I will second it.
Okay, we have, sorry, this is Natalia, Madam Chair. You do need a motion. It seems that Member Evans, seconded by Member Khoury, has a motion.
Okay.
Okay, so on that, I do want to make some comments. I just wanted to understand where we were going with this. I think it's important that we don't want to get stuck on paralysis by analysis too much either, right? And I think I agree that all these things, including what Francine Maxwell shared earlier and what we've been talking, I think all of that needs to happen. And I agree, a holistic approach. But I think there's different departments that are going to be moving on different pieces of this, right? Like I think this piece right here, staff-wide, I believe would fall under the city clerk's purview, and they'd get it going. I believe a larger workforce would probably go under some, human resources department purview, right, to look at. I actually was also thinking of another area I'd like to make demographics for, which would be contractors or vendors, right, as well. So I think those are three very distinct areas that have three very distinct management teams that would be reviewing that data. So my recommendation would be to, yes, approve this motion, but also to ask staff to come back with a plan for doing the other two
Okay.
I don't want to say at the same exact time, but I don't want to wait for one to get started with the other one, but they can get started parallel to each other based on the ability of each of those management teams or groups to do it. So that would be my recommendation if we could do that.
Excuse me, are we expanding beyond boards and commissions? Because this specifically focuses on boards, on county boards and commissions.
And committees, yes.
So are we adding layers beyond the boards that already exist? I understood that we are asking what is the demographic. Let's assume there's a certain board established by the county in North County. Would like to know the demographics of that specific board rather than go into data of contractors and so on, etc.
Well, what Commissioner Anaya is saying is let's focus on boards and commissions and committees as reflected in the language of the recommendation specifically. And then President Maxwell brought up the demographics and workforce information around suicide prevention department as well. So, and my thoughts were, why don't we do it holistically? But I'm at the will of the opinion of the commission here. If you want to do it piece by piece or as requests come in.
Chair Nash, this is Rachel Witt. I think staff is having some hearing audio difficulties. I'm just going to chime in and say that I'm not sure what the committee that Ms. Maxwell mentioned this morning. Do you know if that's a county board, commission, or committee?
Sounds to me like it might have been at the department.
Okay, so at least the recommendation that's before your commission for discussion is related to county boards, commissions, and committees. And so if there is a motion and a second, and so if there's a vote, then staff would work with county staff to obtain information and bring that back to you.
Okay.
My understanding from the discussion this morning is that the committee or commission that Ms. Maxwell mentioned this morning was forwarded to add to the next agenda for discussion as to taking action on that matter.
Okay.
And so that was what I understood to be happening. And so to the extent you wanted to do something other than that, you could certainly also include that in whatever motion you're making.
Okay. So the motion, we have a motion. We have a first and a second in terms of proceeding with the workforce diversity analysis and as it relates to boards, commissions, and committees. We have a first and a second. Any more discussion or more discussion?
It looks like Member Perez's hand is up.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm a little bit confused. So the holistic approach versus, piecing it, but it sounds to me like the holistic approach may not work because like Maxine is asking for something very specific, like diversity information, and then on the suicidal. So that's very specific. She's asking for something very specific, but then the request to get the demographics for the boards, commissions, that I think is a whole other thing. What are those demographics exactly? Who are we looking at? Are we looking, like Member Curry said, are we looking at South County, North County? I mean, what are we looking at? So I don't know, in my opinion, that it fits into a holistic model because it's different. It's different information being requested unless you're just going to go holistic, where you're just going to request everything all in one. And it seems like a lot of data then to decipher. So, I mean, in my opinion, I think we should just, take it you know, based on, you know, one topic at a time. Right now we're looking at, you know, the diversity part. We're looking at maybe demographics down in South County. I just think that might be a better approach in my opinion. And I'm not sure. And then secondly, the motion, I'm not even sure what the motion is. Is it just to accept the recommendation to look at this further? I'm not sure what the motion on the table is. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Stella?
Yes, thank you. I agree. I think it's too much to decipher. So I would like to, you know, take it one at a time because, you know, putting it holistic is a little more complicated. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Let's see. That's any other discussion?
Could we see the motion again, please?
Who made the first?
I can read it if you want to.
Please.
It says, request the Chief Administrative Officer to direct staff to conduct a study of the demographics of all County of San Diego boards and commissions.
Okay, it's here now. All right. And we had a first and we had a second and then we had any more discussion?
Well, based on what I made a motion to, that really doesn't include, at this point in time, the way it's written, that does not include President Maxwell's request. However, since we're going to approach that at our next meeting.
I'm on the phone, but I can't do video. I don't know. I can call roll.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So I would make it separate. This is what we're asking for. This is the motion.
Okay.
And at our next meeting, we will discuss.
Let's wait for a minute. Let's wait for a minute, Member Evans.
Yes, ma'am.
Just wait for a minute for the technology to not interfere. Claudia?
Yes, I'm back via phone.
Are you back?
I am back. My camera won't work at the moment, but my volume does. I apologize for those technical difficulties. There's a connectivity issue for us.
Okay.
So we're back.
All right. All right, Member Evans, proceed.
Basically, all I'm saying is that can we call for the question and vote on this motion? And that what President Maxwell is requesting, we will discuss at the next meeting so that it is separate. And I think there'll be less confusion.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
No problem. So we want to call for the vote.
Okay, and that would be the vote on the motion is as based on the recommendation post.
Yes.
For your
yes.
consideration. Okay.
Yes.
Let's go ahead and take that call. Angela Elliott Santos.
Aye.
Bill Gore.
Aye.
Eleanor Evans.
Aye.
Elena Perez.
Aye.
Ellen Nash.
Aye.
Estela de los Rios.
Aye.
George Corey.
Aye.
Gwen Sanders. I believe Ms. Sanders phoned in, so she may need to be unmuted. In the meanwhile, Pedro Anaya, Member Anaya.
Aye.
Sam Choi. Member Choi. I believe he left. Member Stefan.
Aye.
Member Hassan.
Aye.
Member Gillies had to leave. Member Arton.
Aye.
And this is Gwen Sanders. I'm not sure you received my aye on the motion for subject 6 on our agenda.
Member Sanders, we have just now marked it as a yes. Thank you so much for making sure we heard you. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
That motion carries with a unanimous vote.
Great.
The next item on the agenda, if Andrew can screen share and get to it, is the matter of vacant seats. As you all are aware, the commission has 31 seats. Of those, 15 are nominated by the Board of Supervisors, and the terms run concurrent with the nominating supervisor's term. Thus, with the election of the 3 new supervisors, there are 9 open seats. In addition, we have 2 open commission nominated seats. One is a result of a resignation by member Griselda Ramirez that was recently received, who has started working with Supervisor Vargas's staff. And we have a vacant seat based on absences from member Maya Alfonso, who has not been able to attend meetings due to other conflicting obligations. Now that the commission has been notified of this vacancy due to absences, we can have the clerk of the board post the required notice of the vacancies so that the applications can be received. Thereafter, we will return the commission to the commission with the applications so the commission can undertake the nomination process for the 2 open seats. The commission last had demographics prepared so it could make nominations that reflects the demographics, diversity, and culture of San Diego. Staff will work to update to prepare updated demographics based on the current commission members, and so that you have that information available when considering applications. We do recommend using the same process that we used last time, which was provide the commission updated demographics, to have the commission determine communities currently underrepresented, provide an opportunity for the commission members to review the applications and create a short list of up to 3 individuals for commission consideration. Previously, we had 5, but that's when the commission had 5 open seats. Staff can provide the commission a form to assist in members identifying individuals, and then they would provide, each commission member would provide staff their list of no more than 3 individuals a week before the meeting in which they're going to undertake nominations. Staff would compile the members' lists, noting if certain names are identified multiple times. And then staff would bring that back forward as part of the agenda process, and the commission would make nominations from the compiled list at the designated meeting. The commission can nominate first, later, or vote for individual members. So that would be the commission nomination process. If it's amenable, we would be moving in this direction unless we hear different from you all. But we did want to let you know that we do have an obligation to inform you of those 2 vacancies. The deemed vacancy will then, that member will also be notified in writing, and the clerk of the board must post for a certain number of days. So after today, we'll be able to undertake that process. Are there any questions?
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I know it may be a redundant question. Can commissioners nominate folks as well?
So the commissioners, yes, the 2 open seats are for commission nominated seats. What they would need to do, anybody who was wanting to be considered does need to submit an application, just as you all did originally, and then commission members those applications would be up for consideration, and then the members could put them on what I would describe as the short list of names.
Thank you.
Claudia, this is Commissioner Khoury. Who should they submit their applications to?
Clerk of the board, and I'm happy to send you all out the link that we had that is available. It's the general application for boards, commissions, and committees, and they would submit it, and they would reflect that it would be this commission.
Okay, could you please do that? Thank you.
Okay. Happy to do that.
Yes, please. Can someone clarify, aside from these 2 positions, we have a few people that fell off those other positions. How are the other positions being filled? Are they filled by the county supervisors directly as their appointees?
Thank you.
I'm unclear about that.
Yes.
Thank you for that question. Thank you. The 9 vacant seats are Board of Supervisor nominated seats. So applications, just the same application, is submitted to the clerk of the board, and those applications are provided to the supervisors, and then the supervisors make their nominations and bring those to the board for appointment.
Is there a time frame for that? When will they have those appointments? Because that plays into determining, what communities are currently underrepresented based on
who they appoint as well, and that's 9,
Right.
not more than 2.
I do not at this moment have a definitive timeline for you, but I will provide an update at the next meeting on that. It is, as they are now seated, they can now start making those appointments, but it does take time to go through those applications and make those appointments. I do believe we have a couple of hands up. We have member Stefan.
Thank you. I just want to make sure, because we don't want to neglect the request that we all agreed was important by President Maxwell, that we've agreed, because we can't take up that topic fully and make action items because of Brown Act, that it will be on the next agenda to discuss. And I would ask that that agenda item be left more open, so that is to discuss asking for the diversity study for the county suicide prevention line, and also other county workforce agencies, just so that we're able to fully discuss the kind of having a more cohesive report while we move ahead with the report you've already decided on.
Member Stefan, yes, we have it on the agenda. We will have that discussion item for the next agenda. I do not expect us to actually necessarily have the data for all workforce, but we will come back with what we are able to obtain at that moment.
Excellent, thank you. And then could we get the form, the commissioners, for applications, because we're all connected with a lot of diverse communities that may not be looking on the website, and we that way we can reach more applicants.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We're able to do that.
Thank you so much.
This is no action required on this item, but we did want to provide.
Okay.
Fill those vacancies.
Okay, Member Stefan, thank you for your comments because they were right in line with my summary statements. So if we can proceed on that particular recommendation. It is my understanding that the chair has the authority to add items to the agenda. And so as interim chair, we will certainly acknowledge your request, and it will be added to the meeting's agenda at our next meeting. This is, to me, an ongoing request in regards to diversity, workforce diversity data, because again, data is what drives decision-making, drives policies, and this is what has been missing, I believe, from decisions that need to be made in terms of staffing, workforce analysis, contracting, so all of them. So it's important that I see this as an ongoing discussion, ongoing request in terms of workforce data for future meetings. So believe me, it will be on the agenda, happily on the agenda. Any more comments?
I don't see any other hands, Madam Chair.
I want to reiterate that the recruitment and the recruitment strategy in terms of applicants for our commission as well as all commissions, that we do take a look at our recruitment strategy to ensure that we're getting the word out to all communities in regards to media, in regards to newspapers, in regards to Facebook, the whole 9 yards. We're getting the word out about commission vacancies and commission opportunities. Personally, it has been a challenge in knowing what vacancies are available on commissions. So I would like to ensure that the Leon Williams San Diego County Human Relations Commission is a leader in ensuring that the word about these opportunities are available to all communities.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, with that said.
you're able to adjourn at your.
Great. We're able to adjourn Tuesday, January 19th, 2021. Again, Happy New Year. And let's look forward to great and awesome things in 2021. Thank you so much.
Thank
you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.